to its own actions, not by provoking a warlike confrontation, but perhaps by stepping up U.S. combat forces in the Caribbean, which would serve to neutralize any possible threat from Cuba, and perhaps by challenging Soviet interest elsewhere through a mix of military and economic moves that, while not directly threatening Moscow, would adversely affect Russian concerns. The president, said one advisor, is not going to paper over those troops. The status quo will be changed. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, the White House.
This is John Scali. Top administration officials have now started to consider a wide range of military and economic pressures against the Soviets. Among the most sensitive is the possibility of helping arm China with modern weapons, a step that would be sure to alarm the Kremlin. Any such move would come later, after other less dangerous decisions, such as sharply reducing American grain shipments, now at a record level. It is estimated that American wheat and feedstock exports to the Soviets will surpass $2 billion this year. Administration leaders would be most reluctant to order such cutbacks because of the humanitarian aspect involved in such sales. But if necessary, such decisions would be made, say informants, along with a sharp reduction in shipments of American machinery and high technology items. Military countermeasures would seek to avoid any direct military threat to the Soviets. But steps that would be considered are reinforcing American ground and United States units overseas, plus helping anti-Soviet forces near the Russian border.
Crocker was told today that unless those Soviet troops are removed from Cuba, there's virtually no chance for Senate approval of the new strategic arms treaty with Moscow. The grim warning came at a White House meeting with congressional leaders.
The president's got a tough problem. I said before, the only thing he can't do with this Russian troop problem is nothing. He's got to do something. This is Jimmy Carter's challenge. I think we've used too much time. I think the matter should have been dealt with by now.
Well,
John,
you were telling me about this situation. I don't know whether it was you were in Cuba or a friend was in Cuba when the word came down to cover it.
Yeah, a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine that I've met since I got out of the CIA, was passing through town, and he had been there covering the Non-Aligned Nations Conference.
He was a writer or a reporter?
He is a writer, yes, working on a magazine in Washington, a controversial magazine, but he was there as a reporter with the reporters covering the conference. They got, the various reporters got instructions from their offices in Washington and New York to find out about the Soviets in Cuba. And they sent back messages, according to him, all of them saying, you've got to be kidding. This has got to be some kind of a grand put-on. And they got terse messages back from their headquarters saying, it's the big story of right now. Do it. Find out about the Soviets in Cuba. And they couldn't believe it. It was an international joke, literally. Now, well, let's back up a big step and note what nobody brought out, and they certainly could have, and that's that the subject, the issue of Soviet troops in Cuba was a spin-off, an evolution of a CIA operation to disrupt and manipulate the Non-Aligned Nations Conference. Fidel Castro was managing this conference, was hosting it in Cuba near America, which is a difference, and he's the old anathema to the CIA. The CIA tried to kill him so many times, unsuccessfully, 20 years, unable to rid itself, rid the United States of this communist leader on our shores. And this year, the Non-Aligned Nations Conference is meeting in Havana, hosted by Castro. The CIA went all out. The thing they seized on as an issue to discredit Castro was to make him appear to be not non-aligned. He's aligned with the Soviet Union, which is probably true. It's probably his Achilles heel as a non-aligned nation's leader, is that he is aligned with the Soviet Union. How better could the CIA bring this out than to make a big issue of Soviet troops in Cuba? And it's been leaked out. If you read these various articles in Time magazine and the New York Times and the Washington Post and elsewhere, you notice that it is admitted that the CIA was working with the National Security Council, the National Security Advisor, Brzezinski, on the subject of the conference, the upcoming conference. And they did seize on the presence of Soviet troops in Cuba as an issue. And exactly during the conference, they make this dramatic announcement of Soviet troops in Cuba. Now, what is brought out in bits and pieces, but not very well, by the media in covering this, by the statements that were quoted, is that there was no threatening Soviet presence in Cuba. No one at any point pretended that the U.S. national security was being jeopardized by a Soviet force that could invade Florida or Puerto Rico or anywhere else. It was a trivial 2,000 men approximately. A lot of semantics were played on whether or not they were combat troops. Well, I would react by saying that they were, in fact, combat troops, but combat troops are also instructors, so the Soviets may be telling the truth there. But they're infantry troops, but they are not assault troops. Even President Carter, in one of his speeches, admitted this. They do not have the delivery capability, the ships, airplanes, helicopters, however, to move from Cuba to Florida or Puerto Rico or somewhere else. They're not assault troops. They don't have an aggressive posture or capability. They don't have the weapons that would go with an assault unit. The press dramatized this issue by talking, and you notice these commentators, the drama that they would get in their voices, where they would say, Soviet troops in Cuba, you know, and it makes you want to sit up and get nervous. If they had said, this tiny Soviet force in Cuba every time they brought it up, or something like that, it would have put it into its true perspective. Something else?
Well, John, do you think they manufactured the story then? That we've known that there have been Soviet troops in Cuba since 1962.
Definitely.
There were something like 40,000 troops at that time, and most were withdrawn, but there's been 2,000 or 3,000 troops there continually.
The whole time, and Vance's, the Secretary of State's, the administration's first announcement of this as being an issue, objected to the status quo. He did not object to the introduction of Soviet troops into Cuba. He said the status quo is unacceptable, because he knew that the Soviets knew and the Cubans knew that we knew that they had been there the whole time. There was nothing new about this issue. The only thing that was new was the Non-Aligned Nations Conference happening.
Right, but did the media adequately point out that no new Russian troops were actually recently placed in Cuba? Didn't they give the impression from the news clippings that this was something new, something threatening, something dangerous, as if Russia had recently put a whole flock of new troops there that suddenly posed a threat?
Certainly.
So this is really distortion of the grossest
magnitude, because it's exercising the American people, it's jeopardizing SALT. Notice also that every one of the senators and other individuals that are quoted there has some major vested interest in making an issue out of this, except perhaps Senator Byrd.
SALT won't go, said Church, unless the troops are out. And presidential hopeful Baker said he won't be able to remain silent if the troops aren't out soon.
No, he either has the guts to do something about it or he doesn't.
There's no need to look at this as though it's a crisis. I was here in the 1962 crisis. I've been here in some pretty tense moments. But there's no crisis here.
Scoop Jackson is the original hawk, always clamoring for more arms and a more dramatic U.S. military posture. Baker, of course, and Goldwater, traditionally critics of the Democratic administration. Baker with his own presidential aspirations. Both of them conservative, both of them looking for issues that they can stir it up to egg the administration on to challenge the Soviets, to sort of go to war. The Hawks were able to play this issue into a situation which apparently is going to lead, has led, and is going to lead to an escalation of military activity in the Caribbean and greater defense spending. We now have in the press today 2,000 more U.S. Marines being put into Guantanamo Bay on Cuban soil, and other Marine military maneuvers in the Caribbean. It was a field day for the Hawks. Dunn is another hawk, 5% military budget increase. Frank Church, of course, is a traditional liberal, but he's in jeopardy of losing his position in the new elections. His state, I believe it's Idaho, has turned conservative under him. And so he was back when this was launched. He was advised of it over a scrambled telephone while he was back in Idaho campaigning. And his reaction has been quoted abundantly, that he said, I can't sit on this. I can't keep this secret. Soviets in Cuba.